Hey there, did you know that even though the Raspberry Pi is already super power efficient, there are ways to make it use even less power? This can be really handy if you're running it off of a power bank or even a power supply. But sometimes you might also have an always-on project that's running in the background, but you want to keep your energy costs low. So we'll start with technical tweaks that you can make using your Raspberry Pi. For starters, have you considered using a headless setup? This way you can skip connecting a keyboard, mouse, or a display. You can basically control your Raspberry Pi remotely using SSH or VNC from another computer that's on the same network. This setup is easily the quickest way to cut down on unnecessary power usage. But here's a question for the next idea. Are you really using those HDMI ports? Because if not, you can turn these off to save even more power. To disable HDMI, you can run this command using sudo tvservice. This is basically turning off the power that's signaling those HDMI ports. And by the way, if you happen to get this error message, it means you'll need to enable an older driver for this to work. And so to do this, we need to edit a config file that's located in one of two locations. If you have a Raspberry Pi 5, it's in /boot/firmware. Otherwise, it should be in /boot. So once you have the file open, search for KMS using Control W and add an F before the KMS part. Now save the file with Control X followed by Y and then hit enter. Let's reboot the Raspberry Pi using sudo reboot to get these changes to kick in. And once your Pi is up and running again, try to execute the tvservice off command again. This time it should definitely work and that error should be gone. Keep in mind that the command to turn off your HDMI won't be persistent across reboots. So if you want to make these changes permanent, you can add it to your rc.local file. To do this, let's copy the tvservice off command first. We'll need to run sudo nano to modify the rc.local file. Let's go all the way down, and before you reach the exit line, right above it, paste the command and then save your file using Control X followed by Y and then hitting enter. So now that we've turned off HDMI, you can take it a step further and consider underclocking your CPU. I've done a video on overclocking your Raspberry Pi, so you can follow the same process, but instead try to use lower speeds that underclock your CPU. And remember, anytime you slow down a processor, you are reducing speed. So you definitely want to try to keep it high enough so you're still productive. And now for another power saving trick. Do you really need all those LED lights kicking off on your Raspberry Pi every second? If not, you always have the option to completely disable the onboard LEDs on your Raspberry Pi. So if you want to do this, we need to make changes to that same config file that we updated earlier. This time, we're going to be adding a bunch of LED options at the bottom of the file. And I've provided these in the video description, so save yourself some time and copy those. Before we save, there's two things that we need to consider. So first, if you have a Raspberry Pi 4 or 5, you can keep 4 as the value of the last two Ethernet LED parameters. But otherwise, if you have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus or lower, you should be using 14 instead. Then just save the file using Control X followed by Y and then hitting enter, and you should be seeing these changes kick in after you reboot your device. So as you can see on my end, the lights immediately went off during the reboot. And now let's talk about things that you can do outside of configuring your Raspberry Pi to save power. So even when shut down, your Raspberry Pi will keep drawing a tiny bit of power. So if you know you're not going to be using your Raspberry Pi for a while, just unplug it completely so you're not wasting that power. Then, about those unneeded peripherals. So if you're using SSH or a Raspberry Pi in headless mode, consider disconnecting things like keyboard, mice, or other fancy storage devices that are soaking up a ton of energy. And believe it or not, even wireless devices that are plugged in are still using that power. And also, if you use any kind of hard drives with your Raspberry Pi, but you do have SSDs laying around, try to use those instead. you'll start to see less power being generated, less heat, and maybe even less noise. And by the way, did you know that each Raspberry Pi model uses power differently? So if you're in the market to buy one that uses a lot less power, consider the Raspberry Pi 2W or even the Raspberry Pi Pico. Both are still pretty powerful, but they're equipped with maximum efficiency. So I hope these tips helped you get the most out of your Raspberry Pi while keeping your power consumption to a minimum. Thanks for watching, and for more on Raspberry Pi, please consider subscribing to this channel.